Good morning, everyone. George Duckle, we'll call this meeting to order. This is the Arkansas State Plant Board Pesticide Committee meeting today here in the room with me. The committee members, Garrett Frost is with me. I might go around the room real quick and introduce everybody. Andrew, you want to start it off?
Andrew Grubmeyer with the Agricultural Council of Arkansas.
Chandler Barton with the Arkansas Department of Agriculture Forestry Division.
Kyle Cunningham, Department of Agriculture and Forestry.
Amanda Andrews, attorney with the department.
Tracy Eads, Department of Agriculture.
Corey Seats, Department of Agriculture.
Lee Gibson, Department of Agriculture.
Susie Nichols, Department of Agriculture.
Dennis Gardisser, WRK of Arkansas.
Thank you very much. And roll call here. We'll go down the row. I guess, do you have Linda who's here or not here, or do I need to call roll physically?
All the members are here. I can call them if you would like.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, online we have Dr. Nathan Slayton,
Present.
Nathan Reed,
Present.
Matt Miles,
Present.
Amy Angel,
Present.
and I believe we have a couple board members on.
Okay.
Call us, Robert Thorne. And also
Robert, are you there?
Caleb Wall is on.
Okay.
Present.
All right.
Is Nick here? We're getting an echo down here. It's
They can.
oh, it's okay.
If you'll mute, you can mute your computer.
Got a little technical difficulties here.
It's just a minor. I should know where it's coming from. You know, Ace fixing to speak, so
Okay, all right. Well,
Just
hey,
total
thank you,
yeah.
everybody that's here in person and on Zoom. All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Susie, and she's gonna introduce our guests.
I've gotten a lot of questions from the board and committee over the past couple of years about drones, and I don't have a lot of answers. So back in the spring, Garrett wanted me to reach out to Dr. Dennis Gardisher, and for y'all who don't know him, he has a PhD in engineering, an MS in agriculture engineering, and a BS in agriculture engineering. He was with the University of Arkansas from October through January 2009. He was professor and associate department head. He was the extension engineer, and he is currently the president of WRK of Arkansas. While several of these committee members may not have met Dennis, he is basically our go-to for any aerial knowledge in the state. He's at every aerial applicators meeting. I've known him for years. So Garrett asked me to reach out, see if we could get him in front of the board, get his thoughts, concerns, comments. Basically, we're looking at the capacity of drones to even meet the federal level requirements to apply pesticides. And Dennis's biography, I gave everybody a copy. As you can see, it's very lengthy, so I just hit the high points. He can go into more detail if he'd like. But I'm going to turn it over to Dennis.
Thank you. Also in the room, Secretary Ward just joined us. Thanks for coming, Secretary Ward.
Hoorah,
That's all right, that's right.
it's Marine Corps guys, I'll stick together. All right. It's a pleasure to be here. I have been here quite a while. I think I've only been in this room once since I retired from the university. I'd like to put a plug in. One of the things that Susie didn't mention is I am in the Arkansas Aviation Hall of Fame because I work with Ag Aviation. And the Hall of Fame presentation and banquet is coming up November the 13th at 6 o'clock. I'll be out at the Little Rock Country Club. Encourage everybody to be there. I know the Ag Aviation Association bought a table, Gary. Anyway, I'm here to talk about drones. One of the things that I do since I've retired internationally, WRK manufactures equipment and software to dynamically analyze spray patterns from aircraft. We've done that since the 80s when NASA actually gave Oklahoma State a grant to develop that system, and it's evolved and gotten better over the years. I'm essentially retired, but I do a lot of tort litigation work on pesticide trespass. I do a lot of work on engineering and things like that. But one of the things that I have done recently, because of the advent of the utilization of drones, is a lot of drone testing. And I've tested probably in the last year over 50 different drones, about every platform style that's out there right now. I want to share some of the things that I'm seeing with you. I want to share some concerns that I have, and we'll just kind of take it from there. So we're using this computer technology, and I'm gonna share my screen, hopefully.
Do you remember how to do this, Brady? It was just a second. He's got a Mac and we had to, oh, there it goes. Yeah.
One of the concerns that I have, besides all the regulations, and I'll get into that, and the insurance and everything else, is performance of drones. I also sell aviation insurance, and there's no clause in insurance for performance. So when we look at those, one of the things, this picture taken, it shows what happens. A lot of these platforms only have 2, maybe 4, maybe 6 nozzles on it. And if you can just imagine, if you're going to paint this wall, and I'm going to paint that wall over there, which might be 30 feet. What's the width of this room? 25, 30 feet. And I'm going to use 2 nozzles to paint that wall. Now, how many of you imagine that I'm going to have coverage of that whole wall with 2 nozzles? If I use a paintbrush and I've got 30 bristles in it, and I repeat that several times. So what I'm seeing, and what we see in this pattern here, this has 2 nozzles in it, very typical. In this particular one, if we're worried about chemical trespass or drift, one of the things that happens with drones, if you have 2 nozzles, in order to spread any width, you got to fly a little bit higher than we might see from other aerial platforms. And typically when I test those platforms, they want to be anywhere between 10 and 20 feet high. And so I just show you what happens when we look at some of the field stuff when we do that. And I don't know if I can. This is what we see happening. In this particular case, what happens when the drones get to the end of the field, they kind of buck up and stop and change position. And so you see this pattern that develops in the field, and you develop non-uniformity. And frankly, I don't have anything against drones, but frankly, if I was a farmer, if I was a grower, that is not satisfactory. And that's not the only one. I mean, I fly around a lot, and I flew to Michigan one day last week, and just south of Lansing, Michigan, I was taking some pictures. So, besides the regulations, I'm really concerned about the application. Now, personally, I think these small drones are a fad. I do see larger drones in the Ag Aviation Expo for the National Association last year. There was a full-size helicopter, Robinson helicopter with a drone system on it. And we know that we can certainly spray with helicopters. So I'm gonna start sharing this window and just go over to my presentation. And see if I can share screen. Well, I thought I could.
We tested this before y'all got here.
Oh, I got stuck.
Share this one.
Okay, well, you should have a handout of this, but I'll just go through these. For state regulations, for instance. there's a regulation on wings, total wingspan. And the one that gets confusing on drones is typically helicopters will have a wingspan, a boom length versus the wingspan requirement of 80% or less. So if I have a drone and the rotors are this big, what's 80% of the rotor diameter? The regulations do not fit drones. So what's being taken typically as the rotor diameter is if I extend the blade so that the outboard blades are at their maximum extension, at least widthwise. Whatever size door it takes to go through without those blades touching it, that's what should be the maximum boom length. That's not what's being used on it yet. If you saw the picture that I showed, in any of them, they're running, particularly if you just run two nozzles, they're right under the center of those rotors, more than that width. So they cannot comply with that. State regulation has a restriction on rotary atomizers. It says rotary atomizers are not allowed for herbicide applications. And a big portion of the drones that I see, the picture I showed you has 2 rotary atomizers under it. Only 2 nozzles to spray hopefully 25, 30 feet. Another regulation in the state is it says you can't have more than a 30-degree deflection, maximum deflection relative to the airstream. So typically what we do in airplanes, it's the reason that restriction, if we're flying forward, we can orient the spray rearward so that we reduce the shear component of the spray. So if we were flying forward at 100 mile an hour, if we could spray rearward at 100 mile an hour, it would be like spraying still air. So the state instituted a regulation. If you change that angle so it's not spraying straight down, and you bring that nozzle down more, there's more shear, and we can change the droplet spectrum that's desirable for different applications by utilizing that shear component. But once you get past 30 degrees, once you get more shear, you get a smaller droplet. And so the state institute for herbicide applications, a maximum shear angle, and I quote this right out of the regulations. I mean, you guys, this is the State Department, and it's right out of the orange or the green book one. I can't remember which one. There's also a requirement for herbicide applications, but to utilize and I call it plant board, the Department of Ag form called a DP58. And in that form, it requires that for herbicides, that they made a droplet size of medium or greater according to the American Society of Agriculture and Biological Engineering Standard S572. And there's a couple different versions of that, so I've labeled it 572.x, but the requirement is the same. That standard is done by taking a reference set, send it to the laboratory, and it has to, a particular nozzle has to be tested against that reference set at the same time, under the same conditions, by the same piece of equipment, and by the same technician. So if I want to use a nozzle on a drone, or any platform for that matter, helicopter or fixed wing, all the fixed wing popular nozzles that we're using, CP nozzles, flat fan nozzles, have gone to that laboratory and been tested and established what the droplet size category is according to that standard. The only way to do that is in a lab. I can't do that in the field. Now I can give you an estimate with the droplet spectrum technology, but it does not meet the standard unless I send those nozzles to the laboratory to have that droplet size, and we call it DSC, established. None of the drones that I've tested, not a single one that I've seen or tested, has been able to meet that standard. Has not sent a nozzle down there to have it tested. Now, what they will say sometimes is that they're using flat fan nozzles, and Spraying Systems Company, which is one of the most popular manufacturers of nozzles, does have data for flat fan nozzles. But that is static data. They do that in a laboratory, and it's meant for ground application. So you can't take that same data set and put that over in a platform that's moving 20, 30 miles an hour. It just doesn't fit. And so it says it has to be tested under the same conditions. When they do it in the wind tunnel, the wind tunnel has the ability to go 60 to 180 mile an hour. So they have a couple different ones. They have a low speed one for helicopters, but drones a lot of times don't meet that 60 mile an hour, so they don't have nozzles available for them. Going down to category E in that handout, they can't put out high volumes because there's only so much you can force through a small number of nozzles and try to get any width. It just, the physics don't hardly work. So most of the ones that I tested want to do 2-3 gallon per acre max most of the time. And when I try to do pattern testing, and I'll talk about pattern testing in a minute, at 5 gallon per acre, it all goes south, so to speak. It's very, very narrow. The droplet spectrum is pretty wide. And the thing to remember about droplets that most people don't remember and is if I double the size of the diameter of that droplet, I get 8 times the amount of water in that droplet. It's a cube root relationship. So instead of doing 200 microns, if I do 400 microns, that means that a 400 microns has 8 times the amount of water in it, which reduces the efficacy, changes the whole pattern characteristics, because those bigger droplets are going to be dominated by gravity and going to fall straight down. So I lose the swath width. At most need, as I mentioned earlier, release height of 10 feet or greater. Most labels say don't release greater than 10 feet, except for safety or to miss objects or stuff like that. So whatever they're doing in the field, when they come to do testing and want to do pattern testing, we actually measure the height of release. And most labels don't really refer to the height of release. They'll say don't make applications over 10 feet high. That doesn't tell me as an engineer anything. That's not specific. If it says release height over 10 feet, then we're on. But if it's height over 10 feet, where we measure, most people think, well, I'm at the boom. No, when that airplane's sitting on the ground, the bottom of the tire is 0, is it not? And we got to measure the bottom tire when we get, so the bottom of that tire is not over 10 feet. I'm within the regulation. But drones typically want to have greater than 10 feet just so they can do that. Another feature that's in a drone is they can program those things for 2 gallon per acre, 3 gallon per acre, or different volumes. But there's no way to know if that drone's actually doing that. So how do we calibrate that drone? I mean, how do we know for sure? Now on airplanes or helicopters, we do have rate controllers that change that. And supposedly the drones do, but when I test them and ask them, I say, how do you know it's putting out 5 gallon? Well, I programmed it. Okay. How do you test that to know? So they really don't have a good feel for what they are. Most don't have variable rate controllers. They go put up, they do 5 gallons, it's going to do 5 gallons. And they're assuming that it's going to be pretty much the same speed. They program the speed in there. And none of them that I've tested, not a single one, have a pressure reading. So a lot of the things they use minimum pressure, maximum pressure, they just program the volume that they want and allow the computer on board to try to do that. So if I ask them, I say, what pressure are you running? So we know we can go back. If we did have nozzles that were approved, they're approved at different pressure levels because pressure impacts the droplet size as well. We don't know. We don't have pressure gauge on here. We can't see that pressure gauge even if it was. So they don't have anything to do with what the pressure is. The DP8 regulation says that for commercial applications, that file should be here at the plant board prior to application for herbicide applications. And Susie's and the board has been pretty particular about having a original signature. Now, where do they get those? If they meet on airplanes, for instance, if they fly under 145 mile an hour, they can fill out that form and submit it to the plant board without any oversight. If they're going to fly over 145 mile per hour, the regulation states that it must be evaluated by a person that the plant board is willing to accept as knowledgeable about the data and sign off on it. But who do you think does those? I've done almost all of them. There was an engineer from Louisiana that did a few back a couple years ago. But typically, those for aerial application require DP 58. And most of our airplanes today, because they're turbine powered, fly over 145 mile an hour, so those come to me. As I mentioned earlier, I sell insurance, aviation insurance. And so I've got a thing here on insurance, and we go into that. But insurance requirements and availability or inavailability of insurance for drones is an issue as well. So if we just go in, that's state stuff. If we just go into label, as I mentioned, they can't meet the droplet size category according to the standard. And it's supposed to be against the reference set, under same conditions, same test setup, the same technician. And that's, it's not cheap. You send it down to the laboratory. The only laboratory that I know of that will take that kind of data for low speed is at in Nebraska, North Platte, Nebraska. Has a laboratory that has low speed that they do ground stuff in that would have the ability. But none of these guys, they don't know that it exists. They don't have any clue about droplet size category. Now, why would we worry about droplet size category on the label? Generic language is utilized on a lot of chemical labels. And on not all of them, but all of those that are being renewed and redone, and a big majority of them have a statement on that label that they must meet a droplet size category of something, might be medium, might be something different, according to that standard. So if I haven't tested those nozzles, technically, I can't comply with that label. And as I said, I have not seen one nozzle on any drone that has that data. They can't comply with the wingspan or the rotor diameter restrictions with the setups that they have. They're fixed. I mean, when they have those booms on there, they're fixed. They can't comply with the regulations. Many of the particularly on herbicides, labels require that the nozzles be oriented parallel to the airstream, shooting backward or no more than a certain degree down. In state regulations, and it's also on federal regulations. With that, patterns. I have tested a few of them that are conscientious about knowing what their patterns are. And as a general rule, the patterns that they tell me, one of the questions that we ask them when we do the testing is what swath width, lane separation are you utilizing normally? And whatever they give me almost invariably is wider than the testing illustrates. A lot of them are wanting to use 30, 35 feet swath widths. And as a general rule, the ones I've tested probably closer to 25. Now here's what happens if we're putting the chemical that's designed for 35 feet in a 25-foot swath, that means we're not getting anything in the overlap region, but we're overdosing the region that we are actually getting stuff on. And what happens with the patterns is because they don't have the weight dynamics to distribute the material out, is the shape of the patterns are very steep-sided. Now, what I mean by steep-sided, if I measure the pattern, it gives us a profile. And if those sides, when you get out to the edge, if they don't gradually diminish and they're very steep, it means that you have to have that pattern swath width perfect. Because if it's steep, if it was a square box, for instance, and some of them get pretty close to a square box, then you have double overlap or nothing. Because it doesn't taper on the outboard edges. So the opposite of that, and excuse me, ladies, but I call it a Dolly Parton shaped pattern, because the drone that I show you with the two nozzles, typically there are two lobes that are in the outside edge. The center doesn't get as much, and outboards don't get as much. So you have two lobes and then a weak center. So it's okay, two mounts. So when they try to overlap, what happens if you have two lobes and you get close enough for an overlap, then those lobes actually increase in the overlap area if I was using an overlap to get enough overlap at all. Now, I'm gonna get into insurance, so I might ask, is there any questions about that before I go on?
Dennis, I have one, and I'm not familiar with the way the nozzle's integrated. Do they swap those nozzles on drones, or is it integrated into the drone and it's gonna be the same rotor?
Yeah, there are two types. Typically the ones that have rotary nozzles, that's a component that's built, a leg, if you will, that's built onto the drone.
Hmm.
And it's fixed. They can't change the location of that rotor nozzle. The ones that you are trying to utilize flat fan nozzles that were designed for ground applications have a short boom under there. And they can do that. And so they can manipulate along that boom just like any other thing. Many of them that are using flat fan nozzles have fixed positions on the drone from the manufacturer that the operator can't change. And that's probably the most common, is having fixed. There'd be 3 or 4 nozzles on there that they can't manipulate. The other thing that they do or don't do is if they're putting out 1 gallon, 2 gallon, 5 gallon, these are the same nozzle. And so, if they vary that rate, they get completely different droplet spectrums and pattern shapes. So, when I go to insurance underwriters, and I've highlighted some of these things on the handout, it says what pilot or pilots will be operating that drone. They will know who's going to be the manipulator of that drone, who's going to be doing it. What licenses, ratings, ages, total drone hours, total hours operating that make and model. Do they have any losses in the last 5 years? One of the things when we insure ag pilots is one of the questions is they want to know what your experience level is. Are you capable of doing that and doing a good job and knowing what you're doing? So if no hours in the make and model, have they done any model drones? Have they worked with model drones? Have they logged any time with that? In what way are they logging drone time? I mean, in airplanes, if we're in the airplane and it's flying, it's pretty obvious for a helicopter that we're logging time. But if I'm flying a drone around, is the drone flying, or when am I? If I'm not in control of it, if it's autonomous, how do I log time? That sort of thing. Under what flying conditions? Are you physically at the controls, or you turn it loose? Now, one of the drones that we just recently sold equipment to is a company called Pyka, Pyka. And if you're interested, you might look at it. It's a fixed wing drone that has 4 engines on it. It's actually just a small airplane, and so it has a small boom on it. And they realize that they potentially need to look at patterns. My company has just sold them a system to be utilized to test their drones. One of the things they did is my partner in Oklahoma builds the systems, the mechanical parts of it, and shipped it out there. And they sent me the check, which I thought was good. But anyway, they are doing some testing. One of the questions, if they're not ag pilots, if they're not adding a drone to an ag pilot business, what's their ag experience? They grow up in the ag business. Do they understand chemicals? Now, these are questions the chemical company wants to know before they want to join in insured and developing liability. They want to know what ratings they have. The Part 107, FAA Part 107, 137. Do they have a certificate of authorization? Those sort of questions, which may not be plant board or Department of Ag related, but they're FAA things. Now, that's going to change. One of the things that's in review right now is a new FAR called 108, which changes some of the regulations. And in that regulation, I don't say this verbatim, but it basically says they don't have to comply with Part 137, which is the regulations that aerial applicators have to comply with. So they're kind of giving them a different book to go by. But insurance, if someone takes insurance and they have an ag business already, what typically happens is that waters down their liability coverage. If they have a $500,000 liability coverage and they have 2 airplanes on it, but if they add a drone, that drone goes into the same pool and it can water down depending on how they do that, unless they wrote a separate policy, their availability to have insurance. Now, the other thing that, and I haven't had one yet, but I can tell you that they're happening because I have associates that people that I work with, is drift potential from drones. Anybody tells you that a drone does not have drift potential, just hadn't been around it very much. The ones that I see, you know, I get paid for doing drift litigation. I can see where there's going to be a need for some of that. With that, that's short and sweet. You know, the thing that I worry about, and the thing that the aerial applicators say to me, and I get calls. I'm a lifetime member of the Arkansas Association and several other state associations, the Canadian Association, Australian Association, and those folks, because of my interaction with them, call and say, you know, how come these drones can get away with this, don't have to do this? It looks to me like if they're in violation of one component, somebody needs to be giving them a citation. I mean, somebody needs to say, look, if you can't comply, then you can't comply until the regulations change. But the regulations simply were not written or designed for this platform. I mean, they just don't fit. And so if they can't meet those regulations, then somehow that regulation needs to be modified, changed, or done somehow, because you're really giving them an unequal potential to do work out there. Now, the other issue that comes up, and I have a different opinion, and we have legal counsel here, is if I'm a farmer, and a lot of times if I have 2 or 3 brothers or cousins, we'll have 2 or 3 different entities involved for a variety of different reasons. But if only one component of that entity owns a drone, and I go spray for another component, I go spray for my brother perhaps, and we've got that under a different farm name for whatever reasons. Am I a private applicator or am I a commercial applicator?
Is money changing hands?
Typically what happens is that if I own that, if one entity owns that drone and it does something for another entity, it allows them to increase their potential income by $1, that's commercial. If I'm doing something for somebody else that gives them the potential to increase their income, I'm commercial. And you know, that can be argued in the legal systems. But you know, they buy these, one guy will have it, or his son will have it, or somebody that's computer technology will have it and be working for 2 or 3 different entities. Those aren't private applicators. I mean, they're doing it, even though they might do it for the farmer and barter, they do it for barter. Is that private or commercial? Depends on how you look at it. Now, in aerial application, what's been accepted is who gets the money. You know, if I go to work for Gary, for instance, am I under my regulation, or am I operating under his regulation? Typically what gets looked at is if he collects all the money and then pays me, we're under his. If I do work and they pay me, they're under mine. But it gets to be a little confusing on, you know, you just need to talk to your insurance company and make sure you know where you stand on those sort of things.
Dennis, you hadn't talked anything, I wish I did hear you, about FAA regs and how that affects this.
None of the current regulations point out differences in drones. You know, the FAA regulations state they gotta have, keep track of who they applied for, what they do and all that, but they really don't address drones. And that's the reason for the new FAR 108 that's coming out. They're addressing that. One of the things that the aerial application current aerial application community is really concerned about is they're loosening a lot of the controls on drones relative to what had been in helicopters and fixed wing. One is that, which I think is, in my opinion, is not good, is they give drones the right of way over all other aircraft under certain conditions. Particularly around power lines or obstructions and stuff. The thinking was when they did that is, ag planes can't go there. I always ducked when I went under those every time I went under a power line, I ducked. I don't care if it was way up there. But they're changing that. And the other thing it says in that proposed regulation, it's under review right now, is that part 137, which is the regulation for agricultural aircraft, is non-applicable to drone applications. And the National Ag Aviation Association has made, they're making a lot of comments and encouraging applicators to make comments relative to their concerns with that new regulation.
If you're doing commercial work, an example you gave, you have to have don't you have to have an FAA license per drone?
Well, the part 107 would, and the certificate of authorization is what the FAA uses to give them that ability. So, if they've got a 107 certificate, 137, currently a 137 certificate, right on the bottom of that page, that second page, and then a certificate of authorization. Now, those COAs are not one paragraph deals. They're 3 or 4 pages that outline exactly what those drones have to do. And currently, the drones have to keep more records than aerial applicators. They have to do they're supposed to do a 30-day summary of everything they did. Under that COA.
To the FAA.
To the FAA.
Do these drones have transponders?
Some of them do. One of the things that's coming out in 108 is that they will have a transponder on them, ASB transponder. Almost all drones, whether they're being utilized for agriculture or not, are required to have an identification software on board. That doesn't mean that I can see it.
Yeah.
But that means that the feds, if they wanted to track a drone somewhere that was doing some nefarious activity, they could see where it was. So all the manufacturers are required to put that on there. They're not necessarily required to put the ADSB, which is the automatic broadcasting system that we have in airplanes. When I went to Michigan about 10 days ago to make a presentation to the Michigan Agricultural Ag Aviation Association, and on the way up there, when one of the things that they're concerned about is a drone can go in and say, I'm operating right here. And it puts a 5-mile circle around him. And they were everywhere. I mean, I was over in Michigan, I was over one of those 5-mile circles.
You were flying your private.
I was on my private airplane. I was over one of those 5-mile circles almost the whole way up there.
Wow.
Now, they don't tell them when to turn them on, when to turn them off. I mean, they're out there all the time. So as an ag pilot, if I fly in that same area, that's supposed to alert me that there could be a drone there. But I can tell you, when you're flying, seeing a drone is non-existent. You can't see airplanes. Little Rock had these little Katana airplanes out here for years, and I live right on Interstate 40, right north of Remington Arms, and they go over to Carlisle to do practice back and forth. And I had students over there, we'd be practicing. You can't see those things. If they're at the same level, and there's no change in differential in that, and they're flying straight at you, they're a full-size airplane. You can't hardly see them. If you think you see a drone, when they did a test in Colorado several years ago, they actually had a helicopter and they had fixed wing go over a field. And what they advise airplanes and helicopters to do, or any air application, is to scout the field, look for anything before I go in there. And they knew that there was a drone in the area of that field. The fixed wing did not see that drone, and they had a lot of lights on it. It was a fairly good sized drone. It was probably 6 feet in spread. They had green and red lights blinking on it. The fixed wing never did see it. The helicopter did see it, but he couldn't maintain consistent contact. He lost it a couple of times, making turns or doing one thing or the other. Kind of like deer hunting, you know, you see them live on and you don't, but, you know, there's concern, in the interaction in airspace, even with fixed things. I've been here, since 1980. And how many fixed wing air to airs with big planes do you think we've had? There have been 8 in Arkansas in my career, since I've been here working. You know, when big airplanes run into each other, you think they're gonna see a drone, you just can't see it. If you see them, it goes like a, goes by, it's gone before you had a chance to maneuver or do anything about it. But, the regulations are not written for drones. And they can't comply with them because they can't get the right nozzle. They can't do the other stipulations in there. A DP-58 for the plant board, they don't know what that is. They hadn't heard of that. Nobody knows what that is. And I'm not sure that they're not picking on them particularly. I'm not sure that the regulations are absolutely clear on the requirement for DP-58.
It's a form.
It says a form, there has to be a form done, and so there's, you know, a little bit of argument on that, but when they call in and ask about that, sir, one of the things I do know, the ground rigs don't do the DP-58s. I mean, it's a requirement for ground applicators as well, and I get very few of them call for assistance on a DP-58 for ground applications.
Dennis, to that point, I have a couple of questions. Have you tested a drone that in your opinion complies with the majority of herbicide levels?
Well,
I've
never tested one that met the droplet size category requirement for the nozzles. I'll tell you, some of my test experience, I was asked by Mississippi State. Mississippi State is doing probably as much drone research as anybody that I know of around us anyway. They have a program aimed specifically at drone. They have master's degrees and PhD students working on or getting degrees on drone technology. And so I went to Mississippi State, Clarksville, about 2 or 3 months ago and spent a week with them. We sold them an analysis system and taught them how to pattern, analyze, measure droplet spectrum. We have the ability to measure droplet spectrum through the image technology, but we can't meet the standard because we can't do it against the reference set. There are not that many reference sets under exact same conditions with the same operator and the same equipment. But we can measure droplet size. So I can tell them pretty close what droplet size they're putting out because of the ability to measure droplet spectrums. The way we do that is we use a paper that's similar to litmus paper, and it's bright yellow, and wherever water touches it, it turns a bright blue. And when it dries and we scan those with a software package that's been developed just for that, it counts the droplets, tells us how many of each size category they are in the full spectrum. But we also get a profile. So we use a string, typically with fixed wing, we spread that string out 150 feet and they fly across it perpendicular. And then we roll it up and feed it to an analysis machine that develops a profile. Now with drones, we don't need 150 feet. Typically we short that string up to 75 feet. Now, a lot of people say, well, how would you use a string? The string is 1 millimeter diameter. So we're getting close. What's the first day of frost in Arkansas? Little Rock's about October, something like that, I think. So we're going to start freezing, and we start getting freezing rain in the morning. And I got to tell you, I don't miss that traffic coming in Little Rock since I retired. But what part of your automobile do you think is going to freeze first? What part of your airplane is going to freeze first? Small leading edges, antennas. So next time you get in freezing rain or drizzle, look at the antenna on your car. The antenna begins to go. Most people say the windshield. That's not true because the small droplets are deflected around it. What happens with a very pointy edge or leading edge is the small droplets can impact it. They're not, and they lose their energy. They don't have a lot of energy in it, and they can change state from liquid to frozen. So the string doesn't deflect that, and it comes across. It's a really nice media. We can run it through the machine real easy, and it gets accurate. We actually have done rates down to as low as 2 ounces per hectare of spray where we can measure it with the dye. And we use a dye solution. The dye solution is not toxic. It's put in the water. It allows us to collect on that string, roll it up. We do up to 3, typically we do 3 repetitions for every pattern test. We feed it through there and then develop what the pattern characteristics are. We've done that for years. That program was developed from a NASA grant about 1978 that was given to Oklahoma State. And my partners, Whitney, Roth, and Kuhlman, which is what WRK stands for, developed that initial technology on paper tape systems and later used the string. But so these companies that have drones are looking at ways to do that. But at Mississippi State, we tested drones about every way you could think of. And it's almost laughable to stand back and see how long it takes them to do one mission, if you will, or to change a mission because of the complexity of programming the thing, getting it all programmed, getting it take off. Some of the things that I didn't know on the drones that we were using there, is that particular drone would not take off with under 1/2 of the voltage in the battery that it was going to need for the mission. So if it was airborne, it would continue till it got down to a certain level, but it wouldn't start that mission unless it was 1/2. Okay, so this thing has 2 batteries in it. They're big batteries. And so they had about 4 sets. So I take these batteries out. I can't put them on the charger immediately. I got to wait about 30 minutes to let them stabilize, do whatever to do before I can put them on the charger. So, this one may run out before the here. So one of the questions that Susie said, I don't see how they do this. Most of the ones that I look at, what do you think you have to have? I got to have a trailer to carry this mother in. Inside that, I got to have chemical. I got to be able to carry chemical with me. I have to be able to carry water with me. I have to have a charger with me. And in Arkansas and southern states, I have to have a refrigerator. Now, why would I have to have a refrigerator? If at 85 degrees or better, or 80 degrees or better, they won't take a charge when it's hot. You got to cool them down a little bit before they'll take a charge. So, these batteries are between 500 and $1,000 a piece. So I got to have 3, 4, 5 sets of those. So I got to have a generator. I got to be able to carry all this stuff. Got to have a truck to transport it. I got to buy insurance if I'm commercial and show proof of insurance to the plant board. Some other means to have coverage. So I just don't see how they make any money, to do enough acres.
What would you consider, okay, from a legal standpoint, what would you consider a drone? Rotary? Because we have a lot of discussion on what this is called.
It's you can look at it any way you want to, but it's rotary. It's the lifting mechanism is rotary. Anytime that lifting mechanism is a propeller, a spinning object, it's rotary. If it's fixed.
So that would be following the rotary setup requirements if it had it on the label.
Yeah, the opposite of that is fixed wing.
Yeah.
Which fixed wing is pretty obvious. If it's not fixed wing, it's rotary. Now the other platform that I've worked with and sometimes past is airlift. We don't want to get into that either. The military has airlift machines, got a balloon type sides on them, and they put large volumes of air. They're not good platforms either. Too hard to get good patterns. But the other thing is that as a service to the growers, it's up to the aerial operators to do that, is to provide a service that's good service. If they can't control the droplet spectrum, if they don't know what droplet spectrum they're getting, we know from research what droplet spectrums we get the best efficacy. And we use a different droplet spectrum for herbicides than we do fungicides. And the reason we use a slightly larger droplet spectrum for herbicides is simply for a balance of a drift mitigation technique. We want to make absolutely sure Now, most people say, well, I don't worry about drift with fungicides, but some of the highest awards that I've seen in litigation have been on fungicides, so you gotta be careful about that. To me, there's no difference. Now, what is different, and I compliment the plant board on doing that, is when you mix different compounds together, if you have water in the mix with the chemical, and then you put a surfactant, or you put a crop oil concentrate, or you put another chemical in there, knowing what the dropping spectrum is not always the same. Yeah, we just completed 36 command tank mix trials where the data will be submitted to the plant board for approval for those tank mixes. Now, we have done, Susie helped me on this, maybe 500 of those over the years. And so the aerial operators look at that. Do you think drones look at that? The one of the reasons they can't do more than 5 gallons, they got these little bitty tubes going out to every little nozzle and actually forcing enough material down through that. Also, a lot of them have more than one tank, one hopper, if you will. So you got a 3-gallon hopper over here and a 3-gallon hopper over there. So you got 2 pumping systems. And one of the questions is one pumping system, we had some problem in Mississippi State, we're doing that, keeping those pumping systems balanced so that the right side was doing the same as the left side.
Do you know of any efficacy studies being conducted? Because that's what I get questions about. I mean, I know it's kind of outside your area.
There have been some efficacy studies done. There's one done in Canada where some work was done, and they were saying drones versus fixed wing. But I gotta tell you, you gotta be there. You need to look at those studies very carefully. I know that one of the things that we see, if I change that droplet size just a little bit, you know, how much, you know, let's say that the drone has a 25% larger droplet size than the fixed wing. How much more water is in that droplet that's only 25% larger? It's twice, it's double. A 26% increase in diameter gets you twice the amount of water. And I always say in some of the presentations I get, that's like having a girlfriend 100 pound or 200 pound. Or when I'm doing flight instruction, I asked, when they come and I'm gonna do a small airplane, just how big an old boy are you? Because it's gonna make a big difference in the atmosphere. So in very, very small changes, if they didn't document, if they just look at drones versus airplanes and look at efficacy, if those are both using the same droplet spectrum, we probably could compare apples to apples, but if we're not, I don't have much confidence in that studies.
And
So there's not a lot of that going on.
sorry, y'all, I typically don't ask questions. And what you're looking at is in the ag world. Are you getting any calls or seeing anything for drones like for golf courses? Or I know I'm getting calls across the spectrum. I didn't know if you had any.
One of the application areas that I think's great is photography studies. I utilize drones when I'm doing a drift mitigation. When I'm doing a drift case, I'll try to hire a drone, or I'll use Sentinel-2, which is satellite technology. I want to look at that area of allegation of drift from a platform that's up there, and I want to see the difference from day 1 to day 2 to day 3 to see how that changes. And so drones are excellent for that sort of thing, for housing developments and stuff like that, or spraying small plots. You know, the Japanese are good at this. They got these small helicopters and a Toyota truck, and they load on the back of a Toyota truck, and they drive up and they spray a plot that's 3-4 times as big as this room, land it back on the truck and go somewhere else. One of the things that I didn't mention is I know of at least 2 situations where the drone took a mind of its own. We have an insured in Louisiana where the drone took a mind of its own and darn near killed 2 people. Actually flew into them, and you get 4 of them rotating blades, which are pretty substantial when they're going. Now, whether that was operator instituted or the drone did on its own is not clear, but we do know that it was running and it impacted 2 people. And that's not a scene that you want to be close to, I can tell you.
So to anybody that's on Zoom, got a question for Dennis?
Well, I'm glad to be here. You know, these are partially my opinions, but the facts of the regulations are facts. I mean, labels are labels. Here's my opinion on the small drones. I think this is a fad myself. I think it's going to go away because I can see that there's going to be development of larger platforms that compete on a scale in the future. The National Ag Aviation Expo is going to be in Reno in just a week before Thanksgiving. And I anticipate there will be several drones exhibited there, and some of them quite larger. You know, the new 108 regulation talks about drones greater than 55 pounds. The Pica is one that's kind of in the forefront right now in fixed wing. But anybody dealing with AI knows that there's a lot of stuff happening. One of the things is you can't believe anything you see on your phone or on the TV for AI anymore. But with this AI technology, you know, there's drones being built in Bentonville, Arkansas for firefighting, 2,000 gallon drone, autonomous to do firefighting. With ground following, terrain following features in it. Used to let me, when I go to air tractor, used to let me go through the factory. Not anymore. They're not sharing that firefighting technology with other companies. They're keeping that pretty secret, supposed to. But once we get the bigger, you know, full-size helicopter with a system on it, but I just personally, you know, I have flown it, not a lot. I got about 1,000 hours of ag time. Just can't see how we can know all the obstructions out there, the power lines and the trees and the levee gates that get stood on their end and all this different things and change and avoid those things. I will tell you that drone technology is impressive. At Oshkosh, I went to the drone booth and they got it in a big tent enclosed. And there were two things on drones that I saw that really, really impressed me. One was face following technology. They had a small drone there, and there's a lot of instructions in this enclosed canopy thing. And it's big. Probably 3 or 4 times as high as this ceiling in here, and maybe 4 or 5 times as big. And there's a lot of objects in there. And so they programmed this drone to follow this face. And anywhere that guy went, that drone was 7 feet or so from him. He could not get away from it. And if he hid behind something, it would hover until he came back out. The other thing that they did in that space with all those instructions is they had a terrain following feature where the drone would not run into any of the objects that were in there. And they were actually doing racing or chasing one another in there. And you think this thing is going 60 miles an hour in this small room. How's it not running into something? It was impressive. So technology's going to help us, but size and pattern characteristics. I'm surprised after all of these streaks in the fields that the growers are not just screaming bloody murder about. I know if Garrett's airplanes were doing that, they would be screaming bloody murder.
And committee, just from my standpoint, Garrett wanted to start the conversation. Drones has capacity. Right now, we do license drones like we would an airplane. It's commercial or non-commercial or private with air. They do have to have an aerial license with us, pass our aerial test, and they have to be certified with the FAA. There has been a lot of discussion on what is considered private with pilot authorization. It's a category that the pesticide section has had on the books for ages, and maybe one person would get it a year. It was a farmer flying on their own property. So that category is being asked about more frequently now, and I'll give y'all numbers in a minute. And I will say, Dennis was a key role in helping write rules many years ago for our aerial setup. He actually does some of the droplet studies that allow command to be tank mixed in this state. So that is why we reached out to Dennis. He has a unique perspective on this, and most of the calls I'm getting Or what do I follow on the label? There, I wasn't sure if it's
Yeah,
appropriate or not, can it meet the label requirements? I can tell you my eyeball an opinion, but I'm not an agriculture engineer.
Well, to me, as a commercial applicator, and I have a commercial license, and as a person that works within the industry, you know, and I teach classes all over about, for recertification purposes. If you can't comply with the label, then you're gonna have to do something different. I mean, it's, the EPA designates an authority in every state to make sure those labels are followed. And really, unless there's additional regulation developed by the state, that's their main tool to regulate pesticide application. We owe it to the public, or those designated entities owe it to the public to enforce those federal regulations, federal labor, I think. That's my opinion.
Well, yeah, for everybody's benefit, the reason I asked, and this was pretty black and white to me, do they meet state regs and can they meet the label? And if not, how do we address it?
I think that the only way this is going to get addressed, and it's going to be addressed at some point, is the labels. But the label changes and rewriting is huge expense. So, you know, addendums to those labels or addendums that break them away from that in some way will have to be enforced. But until they are, those labels need to be enforced, I think.
That's kind of.
And that's the opinion of the aerial application community too, I can tell you.
And secondarily, I do worry about the herbicide resistance. If we're not getting a good application, you know, for herbicide applications, it's a big concern of mine.
Well, most people say, well, it doesn't make a lot of difference. You know, my opinion, I've been doing this 40 years and I'm not a weed scientist, but I know around the edges of fields and stuff where we don't get a full dosage and we allow certain species of weeds to escape with a partial dosage, that increases their ability to metabolize and develop resistance. And you know, that costs y'all, but that's just my opinion. Because I see that in working in the industry. So if we're overdosing certain stripes in the field and leaving non-complete coverage in the field, are those unequal paths gonna follow through in successive years? I mean, do we have carryover in the heavy areas and no resist and no control in weak areas? You know, how's that gonna affect us? So we not only 1 year. I do know that one of the things that we never expected was fungicide applications up in the Midwest. You know, the accuracy, not necessarily of drones, but of applications has really shown up in the last few years because I've worked litigation cases on them with the fungicides. Because if you get good fungicide on a plant, it stays healthy longer, and the ones that didn't get enough start to dry down or mature, turn colors earlier in the end of the season. And it's very obvious when you see those, and you can fly over and say, whoa, see what happened there. I can also see what happened when they did with they had a 3-4 gallon left in the load.
We also have our state forester here, Kyle Cunningham and Chandler. Kyle, do you have any, you or John have any
Yeah,
questions?
appreciate the presentation. I haven't had much experience with ag with regard to drone applications. I think if you can't meet the regulation and you're not able to meet the label specification, that's a problem. It doesn't matter what the platform is. The thing with drones, the selling point with drones is that you have precision application. And if that's not occurring, then they're not fulfilling their mission.
Yeah, the thing I'd say on precision application is show me the documentation on that. You know, show me the pattern. You know, that one of the things that the National Ag Aviation Association has instituted, and where they have 2 programs. They have a program called Pest, which is the Professional Aerial Applicator Support System, And it's an annual training session that goes over, flying safety, mitigation, application efficacy, and that sort of thing. But they also instituted another, now we need to change the name, they call it CPAS. But it's Certified Professional Aerial Applicator Safety Steward. Now, in that safety steward, you gotta go through PASS, that has to be one of them. And you have to be a member of the state and national organization. And there's some other online courses that you have to complete. Wire strikes is one, droplet spectrum analysis sort of things is another. But they've instituted that to show that those people that are CPAS certified really get a stamp, if you will, for quality. And a lot of our applicators, the ones that I test, have those printouts, and they put the printouts in their wall showing that they have stuff. I work with the Brazil community, and one of the things that the Brazil, and I don't know what they call these, you know, when you go to scan something, it's got this little square box. What's a little
QR code.
QR code? They actually put a QR code on the airplane, and when you go to the QR code, it brings up all that airplane's test results that are available, which I think is pretty slick. I don't have technology to do that. I'm trying to retire. So, but I think that's neat in being able to utilize that as a selling feature. And I provide a service and to be able to do the best service possible.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's a developing technology, and I don't know that broadcast applications is really where their strength is right now. Detection and spot applications is probably.
I think small acreages is fine, but if I've got a quarter section or something that size or larger, it just, these small platforms just don't fit.
And then the other thing I'm wondering if the analysis should include a single drone or a swarm of drones as one unit. You know, compared to a helicopter or a plane, you have one applicator. With drones, you're gonna have 4 or 5, depending on the size of the drone.
I worked with a company in Washington State where they're doing forestry reclamation and very steep terrain. And the terrain is too steep to go up or down with any type of platform. And it really didn't fit fixed wing. So what they were using were swarms with ground following technology. So they would go along that steep slope as a swarm and then shift and come back down that slope parallel to the slope, which was an excellent platform to be able to do that. And they weren't trying to spray 30 feet wide each, you know, they do 20 feet wide. You got 620-foot swath.
That was the problem I saw with this single analysis, where you're trying to do too much with one drone.
Right.
Secretary Ward, do you have a question?
Yes, sir.
Comment.
Appreciate the presentation. I'd be really curious. I guess we could get it from the FAA and some might know just the total number in Arkansas of licensed operators. I don't know what Susie has for our numbers, but
I can give them to you real quick.
Yeah.
We've got 40 firms, commercial firms that currently have drones. Within those firms, they have 90 pieces of drone equipment. Now, private with pilot authorization, we have 5 people licensed in the state. I do not think that number is accurate, and our rules don't currently let me track how many drones each one of those have.
that was kind of my point. Like I suspect the number, like we hear about people flying drones all the time. And so I suspect, to your point earlier, they're probably not following the state rules on the licensing. He's probably doing FAA, but not following the state.
They hang up on us a lot.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're doing it.
I was gonna say, I don't think they do either. There's just a lot of unregistered equipment out there, what I gather.
Yeah, so first question, second question is, do you know if other states are making progress on this?
The feeling I have is they're all kind of perplexed on how to manage it because of the inability to comply with labels, and they just don't know how to. They recognize that there's a desire to utilize these platforms, but they just don't know how to. Like, in my personal opinion, they just kind of ignored it.
I talked to some states last week and they pretty much said they're doing enforcement discretion because they're calling, honestly, a lot of them are calling me wanting to know what Dennis is doing. So you're famous.
I'm retiring.
Or you have a comment, Bill? Okay. Well, anybody from the Zoom audience, does any of our committee members or board members have a comment or a question for Dennis?
George, I'll just say, extend thanks to Dennis. Very informative.
Who's that?
Dr. Slade.
Okay.
That was Nathan. Thanks, Nathan. Oh, there you are. I can see now. All right. Dennis, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Appreciate
It's
you.
very enlightening, and maybe I'm more confused now than I was before.
Basically, we are licensing drones. It's like any pesticide application. They're expected to follow the federal requirements and the state requirements. This is the first time somebody of Dennis's caliber has given y'all a layout of the capacity of drones. Now, obviously, if we catch somebody misapplying a pesticide or misusing it, we can take enforcement action as an agency.
Have we?
On a drone, off the top of my head, I can tell you we have a couple of investigations underway. I can't give you the final outcome of them yet. But as far as the setup requirements, our inspectors do not have training to basically look at a setup of a drone. They do have training on aircraft and setup. Dennis actually did that training for us many years ago.
That's something that we need to start looking at, Corey and Susie.
That's gonna be up to
They're
this.
gaining in popularity,
This
whether
committee.
it's bad or not. They're gaining popularity.
I mean, they're here. I don't know how else if they don't know how to enforce them.
Yeah.
They're already doing applications. I think we're already behind.
And if we're investigating a drone and I get the pesticide application spray record. Okay, obviously, if the records don't match up to the requirements on the label, we can't take enforcement actions. We've done that with airplanes and helicopters. But if they indicate they did, now we've got a possible conflicting statement that they don't have the capacity to. So this is where I've turned this over to the committee because they're gonna have to get some guidance on how you want us to move forward. And if I misstated
I'm
that,
gonna make
Corey,
another
jump
comment
in.
about, I don't know if this committee understands why the DP 58 was put into place back many years ago.
Do not.
Oh, yes.
What would happen, if there was an alleged violation, with an applicator and the plant board sent notes that they were gonna come out on a certain day to do an inspection or get the information. That operator would call someone, I'm not gonna say who, but they would call someone and say, you know, what nozzle I have been using when they come and ask me questions. And so that wasn't always believed to be factual. So the plant board initiated a DP 58 form, which in effect requires by regulation the applicator to designate exactly what the setup and nozzle would be prior to the application. So if I'm putting out 5 gallons per acre, for instance, and I have an alleged violation where I was using 5 gallons per acre, I can't say I was using a different nozzle because I would be outside the regulation.
Sure.
So they couldn't, after the fact, to decide what setup was going to be optimum, they had to declare that in advance. And so as a proactive thing, the plant board said, well, we're going to institute this and ask them in advance to declare what their setup is going to be.
I said, that's like I said, Dennis was working for the University of Arkansas when we did that. It was even before my time. So, but like I said, right now we are still licensing drones. I have written some clarification into a proposed rule that the committee and board is not, it hasn't come before y'all yet. Not a lot, but it's a little
Well, I think I
clarification.
expected, probably need to get up to speed, take some training during the winter time. Get it speed so we can, and we know there's gonna be more next year. So, for popularity. Okay, anything else?
Not with drones.
Thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate you coming back. That's fascinating. What else you got on your?
Quick update for everybody. Every time I'm in front of y'all, I feel like y'all don't really get any good news. It's a backlog or here's this. So what I've done is I've given y'all a basically pesticide section update. For enforcement, I'm going back to 2017 today because of the backlog. And I've got this in front of everybody. I'm just gonna read these out real quickly. The total number of case files going back to 2017. 2017, we had 1,312 complaints. 2018, 456. 2019, 462. 2020, 514. 21, 565. 22, 418. 23, 298. 24, 226. And this year we have 174. So basically, prior to some things that happened, transpired in 2017, the normal case file load prior to then was about 200. Overall enforcement update. Since 2017, we have reviewed and worked complaints were 3,231. There was no violation, meaning we could not find any pesticide violation. We have sent out 640 warning letters have been issued. The board has approved 565 warning letters. 385 warning settlements have been issued and the board has approved 153 of those. 278 civil penalties are approved by the board, which total $469,740. 219 civil penalties have been paid for a total of $222,865. We do still have an unpaid civil penalty total of $267,175. That's enforcement. Typically, y'all will get a
Can we
year.
go with is that over 90? Is that over 5 years? Or is that?
That's since 2017 to date.
Okay, but out of that 267,
2017 to date.
I understand, but do we know how long some of them are they collectible?
Yeah, I don't have the breakdown of the years.
Oh, I don't have the years in front of me, but
Okay.
you're asking if we can still legally get those amounts?
Yeah, how current, I mean, some of these, are they collectible? I mean, is there statute of limitations on this or what's the?
I don't think there's a statute of limitations on it. I know, and I updated the board last month. We had a collections firm. They dropped on us. And so we're in the process of getting someone reestablished, with.
An outside firm to go after these.
Correct.
This is a state. I mean, cause you gotta pay the firm usually 20-30% or something usually.
Correct.
Does the state not have? Cause I'm sure we've
I'm
got
not
lots
sure.
of taxes and other things.
We can look in the process. I'm not sure.
Okay. But as percentage wise, that's a big percentage that you still have out on receivables. And I know if I had paid the penalty, I'd be upset if somebody else had paid. So, but there's more that have not paid than we've collected.
So what leverage do you have? Do you turn their license off until they pay or what? Well, that's an option too, I think. I don't know what.
Well, I mean, so they still have a license until they pay, but we can suspend their license till they pay. Because these are ones that have been found guilty, right?
Correct.
Or they confessed, or they.
It looks like that if there was a way to turn their license off before they pay, they can't buy chemical technically.
Not restricted either. I get their attention.
That is an option to take it to the board,
Is
for
that,
the board to
that's a board
nullify
decision.
the license. That's always been my understanding.
I'd say this. Garrett, or any other board members, committee members, I would think that's something we ought to take to the board. I mean, it was a recommendation from this committee that we go there.
I can get a list together and get it for the board meeting.
I think we're gonna put some teeth in what we're doing. Need to put some teeth into this.
Okay, and for life.
Let me ask that real quick. I'd like to get that in form of motion from this committee. Approval. As chairman, I can't make the motion, but.
Yeah, how do you? I mean, obviously a certain threshold limitation or just.
Well, we're just saying, if they have,
Board by
yeah, I
board,
would say, that's a good point. What would the threshold be? 90 days, I mean, a year? I'd say, why don't y'all discuss it first? Let me do that. discuss it and bring it back. We'll just bring it back our next, well, we're gonna try to have a pesticide meeting next month.
Possibly, because I've got some enforcement actions that the committee will need to approve.
Let's just bring it back to the next pesticide. We'll certainly have one before next season. Y'all do that?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Gary.
But, and you know, there's been cases where the applicator says, okay, you took my license, I don't care, I'm gonna do it anyway. And I know at one point in time, there was an applicator in the state says, I'll even tell you when I'm going, you guys can come and watch. You know, so there needs to be some type of,
That might be.
and I'm retired, so but I'm telling you, those that are doing right, want those that are doing wrong to get in line.
Yeah. That might happen before we hit the $25,000 maximum fine per incident. So you got some teeth, I think, in monetarily now, anyway.
We can put these together by year, individual and license status and get back to the committee.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Okay, and I'm gonna move on to licensing numbers. These are just for 2025. Sorry for the large bulk of information on enforcement. I just felt like the committee needed to see what has been done. And moving forward, that will be more on an annual basis. Licensing for 2025. Dealers, we've licensed 454 restricted use pesticide dealers, 32 bulk dealers. We've issued 8 240 hardship permits. We've issued 155 commercial firm air license, 156 commercial firm ground license. Custom firm authorization is 136. Commercial firms with drones is, I think this is 40. I accidentally marked on mine with ink. They have 90 pieces of drone equipment. Commercial applicator technicians, we've licensed 36. Aerial applicators, individual, 336. Individual commercial ground, 426. Custom pilot authorization, we have 185. Custom ground authorization, 53. For those wondering, custom means 2,4-D. Non-commercial by air is 5. Non-commercial by ground is 421. Private applicator, 5-year license, 2,496. Private applicator, 1 year, 164. Private with pilot authorization, 5, and seed treater is 2. Out of those individuals, the training that has been done, first time training, certified. Commercial applicator technicians, 14. Individual commercial applicators, 61. Seed treatment, 1. Non-commercial applicators, 211. Private applicator with pilot authorization, private and just a regular private applicator, 800. Again, that's first time training. Individuals who have been recertified. Commercial applicator technicians, 50. Individual commercial applicators, 317. Seed treatment, 1. Non-commercial applicators, 353. Private applicator with pilot authorization, 0. Private applicator, 2,758. We have registered 1,434 pesticide registrants in the state, and we've actually registered 14,783 pesticides this year. The abandoned pesticide program, we have a fall event scheduled for October 29th. This event is already closed. We've already received all the collection forms. It's going to be in Hot Springs County Fairgrounds from 8 to 1. And the total amount collected for that program is 449,686 pounds. We will be having a spring collection event. When we know dates, we'll get those out to the board. We have 2 Section 18s. EPA has granted a Section 18 for an emergency exemption for Intrepid, 2F for control of fall armyworms in rice. And the board also heard from Dr. Norsworthy at the last meeting, and the section has received the Section 18 emergency cannoli packet, and we have sent it to EPA. It is a long shot, but we are going to see what we can do, but it's been sent. 24Cs, we issued one for fall application to soybeans, and Command 3M post-emergent application to soybeans. And that's just a general update for the pesticide section. It is that rule is still, I think, is in the governor's office. That rule and the rule to bring us in compliance with federal rules, along with some tweaks I requested, specifically regarding drone, that's still in the review process. And I'm going to start working on a penalty matrix to bring it up to date in the very near future. At some point.
Thank you, Susan, so much.
Thank you. Y'all got any questions?
Jared? Any other committee members?
You can anticipate 36 new tank mix treatments to be reviewed at the next meeting, I think, because those are completed, it just,
That was the command.
Yes.
command
Command.
tank mix treatments.
Okay,
Dr. Gardisher, Dr. Ronnie Helms, and Dr. Ford Baldwin conduct those studies.
that's a group.
It's very fun to, we've gotten the privilege of going out and watch them do these studies before, myself and Brandy.
Director Seats, you got any questions, comments? Glad to have you here today. Secretary Ward, thank you for coming. The party for Safe Forest. Cunningham, appreciate you being here, Shannon. Hearing none, I'll move that we adjourn this meeting.
Thank you, Joe.
So moved, the second pass. Thank y'all very much.
Hey,
Recording stopped.
Oh,
George.
George, Dr. Slater. Yeah, Nathan.
hey, can the link for this meeting, the recording be shared?
You're better. What'd you say, Nathan?
So are
Can the recording link for this meeting be shared?
It's all public, absolutely. You want Linda to send it? Yeah, Nathan, you want a copy?
Yes, that would be great.
Lynn's gonna do that. Thank you, man. Good seeing you.
Thank you.